Hey everybody, Adele Foltz here, your professor for Accounting 1, and we are going to work on part 2 and 3 of this problem from chapter 3. So we just completed our general journal in our prior video, and that's where we took all of our transactions in October and we translated them. Um, First, we looked at the effect on the accounting equation of each transaction, and then we translated that into accounting language of debits and credits. So here is our general journal. If you're starting with this video, go back because you missed part 1 where we generated these journal entries. So what we're going to do now is we're going to post. This is called posting. What we did in video 1 was called journalizing, and now we're going to post. So we're going to take these transactions from our general journal and post them into our general ledger so we can figure out ending balances in our accounts and then generate a new trial balance as of the end of October so that we can prepare our financial statements. Okay, so we're just going to go account by account here in our general ledger. This column right here, posting reference, I'm just going to put a check mark in that so I know that I've posted that into my general ledger. But usually we would put an account number in there. For simplicity's sake, we're not going to hold you responsible for doing that. Plus, when we use accounting software, which everyone uses to do this, we never do this by hand. This is just for you to learn what the accounting software is doing. You have to learn it by hand before you will know what the software is doing. So the software will complete the posting for you and give you a posting reference. So I'm just going to put a check mark so that tells me I haven't missed anything when I go to post it into my general ledger. Now, you also want to be very, very careful that not only are you posting it in the correct account, but you're posting it on the correct side. So if your journal entry is debiting the account, make sure you put it on the left because debits are always on the left and credits are always on the right. So oftentimes what you'll actually see me do, I didn't do it in this case, but many times I actually write DR or CR on the left or the right. But that's not really necessary because debits are always on the left and credits are always on the right. So it's somewhat superfluous or redundant to actually write it at the top. But sometimes when we're working with adjusting entries, which we'll do in the next chapter, I find that to be very helpful. Okay, so as you can see in my general ledger, I already posted my beginning balances. The beginning balances here as of 10/1, they were on our trial balance as of 9/30. So I opened my general ledger accounts by putting the opening balances on the right side, either the debit side or the credit side, depending on where they were on my trial balance. So if you're not sure where those postings came from, go back and watch the beginning of the prior video. Okay, so let's take the first transaction. In the first transaction, we are debiting cash. And so I'm going to put a check mark here. We're going to debit cash for $1,300. So over here, my cash account, I'm going to put the date, which is 10/5, and I'm going to write in my debit of $1,300. So that has now been posted into the cash account in my general ledger. The second part of this journal entry, credited accounts receivable. So I'm going to check it off, and it credited accounts receivable by $1,300. So I'm going to come over to my accounts receivable account and put it on the credit side because we were crediting accounts receivable, and I don't have a whole lot of room here, but I'm going to try and slip in my date here of 10/5. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay, so that journal entry has now been posted into the accounts receivable account, and I'm able to move on to the next journal entry. So in the next journal entry, we are debiting accounts receivable for 5,100 on 10/10. So I'm going to come over here to accounts receivable on 10/10 and debit it 5,100. Again, it's really, really important that you, when you're posting, that you put it on the correct side, because if you don't, when you complete your trial balance at the end, it won't balance, and you're going to have to go back and find your mistake, and sometimes that's tough to do. All right, so we're done with that debit to accounts receivable, and so in this general journal entry, we are crediting service revenue for 5,100. So I'm going to come over here to my service revenue account and put it in here, dated 10/10. Okay, so that has now been posted. Let's move on to the third journal entry. We're debiting salaries expense for 1,200 on 10/15. So let's go to salaries expense on 10/15 and debit that for 1,200. Okay, that's done. And we credited our cash for $1,200. So let's come up here to our cash account. That is what I'll do. I'll skip a, no, I'll put it up here. We'll try and squeeze it in. All right, so that is 1,200. And that was dated 10/15. Okay, so our next transaction, when we actually calculate our balances, I'll make this bigger so it won't be so tiny. Okay, so on 10/17, we debited cash for 600. So let me credit that. On 10/17, we're debiting cash 600, and we are crediting service revenue for 600. So let's put it down here in service revenue, and that date was 10/17. And then on 10/20, we're debiting accounts payable by 1,900. So let's come over here. That's 10/20. Let's debit it 1,900. And we're crediting cash on the same day for 1,900. Okay. All right. So our transaction on 10/29, we're debiting dividends for 300. So let's come over here, 10/29, and put our 300 in our dividends account, and we're crediting cash for 300. So let's come over here and credit cash, put it on the credit side on 10/29. You can see this is actually quite easy to do. The hard part is just making sure that you don't miss any transactions, that you put it on the correct side, on the left or the right, and that you don't make any mistakes when you move it over. So, you know, if you mean to credit the account 300, you don't actually accidentally write 30, okay? Because once again, your trial balance won't balance. So we're going to see how we did here at the end, if we did all of our posting correctly when we generate our trial balance. So let's take our utilities expense and debit that 400 on 10/31. Okay, and we're crediting cash same date for 400. Okay, so now everything has been posted to our general ledger. So our next step is going to be to determine our ending balances. So I'm going to pause this for just a moment so I can make this bigger, and it'll be easier for you guys to follow along. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, and we are back. So what we want to do next is determine our ending balances in each one of our accounts. So we're going to start with the big one, cash, and I'm going to show it just slightly in a slightly different way than the book does. What I like to do is I like to put a line under all of my debits and credits like this. Actually, let's change our color here to purple. And so I like to put a line here under all my debits and credits, and I like to total my debits and total my credits. So I'm going to, I actually already did, I totaled my debits are 21,100. So that was 19,200 plus 1,300 plus 600. I came out with 21,100 on the debit side. And then I'm going to take a moment here and add up my credits. So it's 1,200 plus 1,900 plus 300 plus 400. So my credits to cash are 3,800. Then I like to put another line underneath that, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare my debits to my credits. I'm going to subtract them, and I'm going to put it on the side that's larger. So I'm going to take 21,100 and I'm going to subtract 3,800. So I'm going to take the total of my debits, subtract the total of my credits, and I'm going to put the balance on the bigger side. Okay. So, so we have 21,100 debits and we have 3,800 in credit. So I'll subtract that. And so my balance of my cash account is 17,300. That is my balance. Okay, so that's going to go on my trial balance. So let's go ahead and start our trial balance here. We would put our company name. I don't recall what that company name was, but you would write it down. This is a trial balance. And you're always going to put the date. It's one date in time. And this is October 31st, 2022. You're going to list your account here on the left. And if it's a debit balance, you're going to list it in the debit column. If it's a credit balance, you're going to list it in the credit column. So our first account is cash, and it has a debit balance of 17,300. Okay, so now we're going to come over here to accounts receivable, and let's do the same thing. I'm going to add up my debits. We have 2,600 and 5,100. So our debits, oh, it didn't add here, 2,600 plus 5,100. Okay, so debits, we have 7,700. My credits, I have 1,300, right? I just added these two and I brought that down. I'm going to put another line and I'm going to subtract the two and put it on the side that's bigger. So the balance of accounts receivable is 6,400. So I'm going to write it here. On the debit side, why? Because it has a debit balance. Okay, now this is also a good time to talk about if you post something wrong. Remember, cash has a normal balance of a debit. Accounts receivable has a normal balance of a debit. So if after I did all my math and I ended up with a credit balance in accounts receivable, that would tell me that I probably made a mistake, because that is abnormal, right? All of our assets have a normal balance of a debit. So if that's a great way to find out if you made a mistake, if you have an abnormal balance. So far we have all normal balances, so that's good. Our supplies had a beginning balance of 2,100. We didn't have any supplies transactions, so our balance is 2,100. So let's transfer that. Okay, down to equipment. Again, no transactions. So our balance at the end of the month is 8,000. We're going to transfer that over. Our accounts payable, we have a debit of 1,900 and a credit of 4,800. So we're going to subtract those two. And that equals 2,900. And we're going to put that on the credit side because that's larger. and also because that is the normal balance of a liability. So we're going to write down our accounts payable. And this time we're going to move it over to the credit column because it has a credit balance. Our unearned revenue, we had no transactions there. So the balance is a credit balance of $1,100. Okay, moving down here. Let's see if we can do this easily. Okay, great. All right, so our common stock, well, let's move it down. Okay, we'll move it down again later. All right, no transactions there, so our ending balance is a $15,000 credit. Our retained earnings, same thing, no transactions until we close our accounts, which is a later lesson. Our dividends, we started out with a zero balance and we debited it 300. So our balance of our dividends is 300. So we're going to write our dividends. And which column are we going to put it in? The debit column, because it has a debit balance. Okay. So let's move these down. Uh-oh, what happened there? Oh, there we go. Whew, that was a little scary. Okay, so let's move this down to our last expenses. We have service revenue, and so we have no debits, only credits. So we are just going to add our credits. So that equals 5,700. That's our balance of service revenue. Let's write it over here. Service revenue. And it has a credit balance. So we'll write it over here in the credit column, 5,700. Okay, salaries and wages expense has a debit balance of 1,200. So I'm just going to abbreviate here. Debit balance of 1,200. And our utilities expense has a debit balance of 400. And those are the normal balances of our expenses, right? Okay, utilities expense 400. Now for the moment of truth. So we've calculated all of our ending balances in all of our accounts, and we transferred those ending balances to our trial balance. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add up all of our debits and all of our credits. And if we did everything correctly, then our total of our debits and our total of our credits should agree. And let's just add another color in here. So let's total our debits and credits. I'm going to pause here. Why don't you take a moment to add them up for yourself and see if we have a trial balance that balances. And if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to check it on my end. Okay, so I just added them up, and it is a happy day because we completed all of our posting into our general ledger correctly. We calculated our ending balances correctly, and then we moved them over here to our trial balance correctly, and the total of our debits equal the total of our credits and our trial balance balances, and we are happy. Now, keep in mind, once upon a time, we called this a trial balance because that was a lot of work to post all of our transactions from our general journal to our general ledger, and then do all the math for our debits and credits and determine our ending balances, and then transfer that over to our trial balance. And oftentimes, once upon a time, back 35 years ago, we only did this by hand. So we actually had to do this. The computers now do all of this. So a trial balance always balances today, but But at one point in time, that wasn't the case because we could have made a mathematical error. We could have just simply made a transposition error, or we just transferred something to the wrong side. We meant to put it on the credit side and we put it on the debit side. And so our trial balance didn't balance, and we had to go back and find our mistakes and correct them so that our trial balance balanced. Now, keep in mind, that does not mean just because your trial balance balances, that doesn't mean everything was correct. It just means that your accounting equation stayed in balance throughout the entire accounting process. Because if you debited the wrong account and credited the wrong account, as long as you did it for the same amount and then posted it properly and transferred it over to your trial balance properly, your trial balance is still going to be, it's still going to balance, but the balances of your accounts are going to be wrong. So if you meant to debit cash and instead you credited cash, if you reversed your journal entry, your balance of cash is going to be wrong. However, your trial balance, as long as you did everything else correctly, your trial balance will still balance. So it will not find that type of error. But if you transpose a number or you post only the debits and forget to post the credits, it will find those types of errors. So, and we called it a trial balance because when we first ran it, it was a trial. We hoped that when we got done, just like I hoped when I finished this one, that the trial balance would in fact balance. But again, today with software, it's not really a trial. It will always balance. But we still do have to take a look at our trial balance, see if it makes sense. Again, if we have an abnormal balance, if it's a revenue account and it has a debit balance in it, we don't expect that. We would expect a credit balance in our service revenue account. That's its normal balance. And just recalling from a prior lesson, the normal balance is whatever makes that particular account increase. So we increase revenue accounts with a credit. So that is the normal balance that we would expect to see in service revenue. If we happen to see a number here in a debit balance, that would be a big red flag that we did something wrong. Okay, so that concludes this second lesson on posting and generating your trial balance. And then I will just make one more comment, but you guys already know how to do this. It is your trial balance is the source ultimately for your financial statements. So as you can see, your accounts are listed here and grouped by financial statement balances. We have our revenues and our expenses here. They go on our income statement, and then we combine our net income with our dividends in order to come up with our retained earnings, and that goes on the balance sheet along with all of, these items. Here, right? Our retained earnings plus all of those. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope this video helped you with your dollars, helping them make sense, and I appreciate you watching it. Thank you.